Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Sunday Bhagavatam class. Today is February 7th, 2021. And we are going to begin today with the Bhagavatam verse 1-9-40. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Bhisma is offering his prayers, and today we're going to study some very beautiful prayers. Very beautiful prayers. Interesting because Bhisma wanted to see Krishna as a warrior, attacking him so he could. It's like a child. A child takes great pleasure in wrestling with the father. And so in the same way, Bhisma he enjoyed that rasa fighting with Krishna. But interestingly, Bhisma also understands and relishes Krishna's other pastimes. So that's what we're going to see today. It's good. That was the verses posted, at least 1-9-40. So this verse begins, Lalita Gati Vilasa Valguhasa Pranaya Nirikshana Kalpitorumanaha Kritam Anukrita Vatya Unmadandhaha Prakriti Magan Kila Jasya Gopa Vadvaha. So if you look at the last sort of compound word at the end of the second line, in Sanskrit compounds, which you can identify because they're words connected by hyphens, almost always the best way to translate a Sanskrit compound is you start at the end and go backwards, and somehow it comes out in the right word order in English. So it starts out Uru Manaha. Mana means respect or reputation, as in Lord Chaitanya said, for example, Amanina Manadena, that Kirtaniya Sadahari, that one who is Amani, that does not have any sense of, I'm just going to adjust myself here, 1 second. One who is Amani, in other words, doesn't have any sense of false prestige or doesn't think too highly of oneself, but manadena, but by one who is giving mana, respect to others. So mana comes from this course from the Sanskrit root man, to think, like manas, the mind. And so mana means like to think highly. So urumanaha, the gopis became urumana. They became very highly thought of. They became glorified in a sense. And this status, kalpita, which also refers to their own self-conception. In other words, they were thinking themselves to be very fortunate. They were thinking themselves to somehow or other to have received this exalted attention from Krishna. And this was kalpita. This was arranged by nirikshana, or brought about by kalpita urumanaha. Nirikshana, Krishna's glancing upon them. Krishna's glance, nirikshana. Nirikshana means to gaze on someone, to look upon someone. And those glances of Krishna, pranaya, were filled with love, and hasa, laughing. He was looking upon them and sort of laughing in a very loving way. Valgu, very beautiful. And vilasa means shining or brilliant or splendid. Also, this pastime, lalita gati. Lalita is a very interesting word. Of course, lalita, the feminine form, is one of the gopis. And so there's Krishna's pastimes. Also, he was not only glancing upon them with this loving, laughing, beautiful glance, but also vilasa. He was moving, the way he was moving, his body movement gati means his movement, was this pastime. He was moving in a lalita way. So I want to read you from the Sanskrit dictionary. There it is. What lalita means here as an adjective describing Krishna's movements. It means sporting, playing, loving, amorous, also artless. The word artless is not a bad word in English. It means sort of like innocent, which is another meaning of lalita, because art has a sense in English like the art. There was someone was scheming, they were planning, there was an art to what they were doing. So artless in English, without art, means there's no plan behind it. It's just very innocent, very open, very spontaneous. So in that sense, lalita, innocent, soft, gentle, charming, lovely. Very positive word. Oh, those are all meanings. I wanted to give you the sense of what this word means in Sanskrit. So Krishna was moving in that way, in that lalita way, lalita gati, and in that way he's performing pastimes, and he was looking upon the gopis, glancing at the gopis with love. It was love and with laughter and with a very beautiful sort of laughing, loving glance. And because of that, because he was glancing at the gopis in that way, they felt themselves to be most fortunate, that they thought that their lives had become very blessed. And so that's the first two lines. And then krita manukrita vatya. Unmadanda. So that means, anta means blind, and unmada means like mad, like when you've just gone mad. And so the idea here is the gopis were so maddened by Krishna's presence, by seeing Krishna, because he's so beautiful, that they became blind, not in the sense they couldn't see Krishna, but they could only see Krishna, and they sort of forgot themselves. And so kritam, kritam, don't try to talk and swallow at the same time. Kritam just means done, that which is done, and therefore it means like a deed, just something, an action, an activity. Prabhupada translates it. So anyway, the movement. So anukrita means imitation, because krita, from the verb krit, to do, krita, that which is done. In other words, like in Spanish, you'd say un hecho, un feito. It just means something which is done. And so anukrita means to follow and do it, to do the same thing, after someone else, to imitate them. And so the gopis are described as anukrita vatya, that whatever Krishna did, whatever all these beautiful movements, they sort of imitated it because they'd gone mad with ecstasy, and they were so absorbed in what Krishna was doing. And andha indicates that they unmadandha, that they were so absorbed in what Krishna was doing, they hardly knew what they were doing. They were just spontaneously moving the way he was moving. They were just so completely absorbed in his activity. So kritam anukrita vatya unmadandha. And because they were so absorbed in Krishna and spontaneously, without thinking, without knowing what they were doing, just imitating him, prakriti magan, Kila just said, they actually, Kila means here sort of like actually, they actually literally went to his nature. In other words, they just became, they completely, their whole existence just went to Krishna's existence, and they became absorbed in him. And this is a very good example of Bheda Veda. The gopis are obviously different souls. They're not Krishna, but they became absorbed in him, so absorbed in him, and there was like a oneness. And then the last two words describing Gopa Vadvaha, the cowherd damsels, literally. Gopa, pa means to protect, like Pala. So, and go means cow. So Gopa literally means cowherd or cow protector. And Vadvaha, it's the plural of the word Vadhu, like the gopis are described as Brajavadhu. Anyway, so Gopa Vadvaha, the cowherd damsel. So And so, interestingly, Bhisma, who personally is relishing fighting with Krishna as a warrior, and yet he is marveling at he who is already absorbed in Krishna, his mind's absorbed in Krishna, and yet he's clearly in awe of the gopis and their level of Krishna consciousness, how much they love Krishna and how much they became absorbed in his existence. So that's the first verse today. And then Muni Gana Nripa Varya Sankuleyantak Sadasi Judishtira Rajasuya Isham Arhanam Upapeda Ikshaniyo Mama Drishi Gochara Isha Avir Atma. It's very nice. So Bhisma here, he's sort of doing a rasa survey. He talked about the gopis. Now he's talking about Krishna in his role as the great Yadu prince appearing in Yudhishthira's Rajasuya. So it begins, Muni Gana Nripa Varya Sankulain Taksadasi. So sadas means an assembly, and it comes from the root sad, to sit, which is related to our English word sit or seat, sad. And so sadas is a place where people sit in assembly. So sadasi means in the assembly. Antak means within. Antak sadasi, within the assembly. Sankule, that was crowded with Muni Gana, the sage community, people from the sage community, great sages, Muni Gana, and Nripa Varya, and the best of kings. So the most important kings and communities of sages, they were crowding this, they were crowded within, in other words, they all came. It was a very important event. Everybody wanted to get in. So they were within this Antaksadasi, within the assembly. And which assembly? Yudhishthira Rajasuya, in the assembly, in Yudhishthira's Rajasuya assembly. And so Asham, of them, of these people, these great sages and kings, Arhanam Upapede, Krishna earned or achieved or received Arhanam, the honor, the great worship. As we know, Krishna was chosen to receive first honors as the most important person in this great assembly, and then Shishupala literally lost his head over it. And that's when Krishna decapitated Shishupala. But so and Krishna is described as Ikshaniyo. Ikshaniyo literally means that which is to be looked upon. In other words, that which is most attractive, that which is most worthy to look at, the most beautiful thing. Prabhupada translates it here, the object of attraction. So Upapede Ikshaniyo. And then Bhisma concludes by saying, Mama Drishi Gochara Esha Avir Atma. So Atma, that supreme soul, or that soul is Avir, is personally visible right before me. The word Avir, these words are very interesting. So I'm giving you the translation of the words so you get a picture of what these words actually mean. So this word avir means right before your eyes, openly, manifestly, evidently. So Bhisma is saying that this soul is right before my eyes, he's right in front of me. This soul, who was so honored in the Rajasuya sacrifice above all the kings and all the sages, this soul who completely enchanted the gopis, this soul is right before my eyes, and he is, and because he to me, he is Drishi Gochara. Gochara means, Prabhupada translates within the view. Go here meaning the senses, chara means moving. So gochara means the range within which your senses can move and actually function. So, for example, if you look at something which is too far away, for you, that is not gochara. Your senses cannot move within that range. It's too far, or something too close. So gochara means within the view of your senses, within view. So mama drishi gochara esha. So he, the Lord, is literally within the view of my sight, personally, right in front of my eyes. This Krishna who did all these things and who is honored in all these ways. So the next verse is very poetic. You'll see that it has a very interesting rhythm. So I'll chant it. It goes, Tami mama hanga jang, Tami mama hanga jang, sharira bhajam, hridi dishtitam atma kalpitanam, pratijashamiva naika dharkam ekam, samadhikatosmi vidhuta bheda moha. These verses are composed very consciously with excellent meters. So Prabhupada translates this: now I can meditate with full concentration upon that one Lord, Sri Krishna, now present before me, because I have transcended the misconceptions of duality in regard to his presence in everyone's heart, even in the hearts of the mental speculators. He is in everyone's heart. The sun may be perceived differently, but the sun is one. So he says, tam imang. Tam means that, and imang means this. So anyway, in Sanskrit, it's hard to explain it here just very quickly, but it's sort of like, that's in Sanskrit how you would say like that very one, or that very person. Portuguese to say mesmo, ele mesmo. That's actually how you say it in Sanskrit. Tamimam. Like that, this, that, this person, that very person. So tamimam, aham, I, ajam, the Lord who is unborn, sharira bhajam, of those who have accepted bodies. Sharira bhajam. So hridi dishtitam. Is in every heart. The way you say often in Sanskrit, there are different ways you can say in every. You could say prati hridi, but a common way to say in every is just to repeat the word. So hridi means in the heart. So hridi, in the heart means in every heart. By the way, the subject of this sentence, I'm trying to give, for those who are looking at the Sanskrit, the subject of the sentence is Bhisma himself. I. In the first line, he says, aham, I. And then in the last line, he says, am, I am, asmi. So in Sanskrit, because it's an inflected language, in other words, you tell what part of speech or where the word goes by the ending. And so if you know Sanskrit, you know that aham, asmi. So therefore, the word order is very free. In English, you have to say, I am seeing. But in Sanskrit, it doesn't matter. You would say seeing I am, or I seeing am, and if you know Sanskrit, it's the same. So you have extraordinary opportunity for poetic composition, because you have all this freedom of where to put the words. So in terms of rhythm, in terms of effect, you have all this freedom because it's an inflected language. Anyway, so Bhisma says aham in the first line, then in the last line, asmi, am, I am. And then samadhi gato, it actually means like I am approached. In English, we would say I have approached. We'd use the auxiliary verb have. In many other languages, including certain Latin languages, you can say I am approached, which means like I have approached. And that's what it is here. Aham asmi samadhi gato. And samadhi gato sort of literally means like means together, like sankirtan, together kirtan, and adi, over. So, and gato, I've gone over together with someone. So that's literally what it means, sam adi gata. And so we just translate in English approach, but if you know Sanskrit, there's a lot there. It's very descriptive. Sam adi gato, I am gone over to, like to join someone. So samadhi gatosmi, in other words, in the sense of I have gone over to join, or I have approached Tamimam, that very person who is Ajja, that very unborn person. So I have approached that very person who is unborn, and Hridi Dishtitam, who is situated in each heart, in every heart, Sharira Bhajam, of those who have taken material bodies. And then the third line is where you really get some philosophy. Pratidrasham eva naikadha arkam ekam. So Arka means the sun. So Arkam Eka means the one sun, which is na ekadha. Ekadha is something like Eka, of course, means one. So it's like in English saying one fold, like you say one fold, two fold, three fold, like how many there are, something. So Ekadha means one fold. And so the sun is one, but it's not one fold. And the reason the sun is one, but it's not just one, is because pratidrasham, everyone can see it. So in other words, we see the sun now. In California, it's about 7:20, 7:21. On the East Coast, it's already about 10:20, 10:21. So the sun's higher in the sky. Obviously in Europe, it's already in the afternoon. And if you keep going in India, it's already the evening. So the sun is one, but it's not one fold, because prati drisham, each person can see it. So prati drisham eva naika dharka meka, but it's said very poetically. The Sanskrit is very clever. And so that little description of Krishna, because, and in a sense, Bhisma is just giving an example of what he means, because the gopis saw Krishna in a very different way than Bhisma. And of course, Yudhisthira doesn't want to fight with Krishna. The last thing in the world Yudhisthira wants to do is to fight with Krishna, but Bhisma does want to fight with Krishna. So Bhisma is giving all these different pastimes, and this is the sense in which Krishna is na ekadha. He's not one fold. Arkam ekam, like the one sun, which is pratidrasham, is seen by each person. So Bhisma here describes himself as viduta veda moha, that I'm a person who has literally shaken off, like freed from, but let's see how Prabhupada translates it. I'm just curious here. There are many English words you could use. Prabhupada says being freed from. Literally kind of duta means like shaken, like a rug, you sort of shake out all the dust out. So you can shake it off. I know when I used to play sports, like in baseball, if someone got hit by the ball, people would say, shake it off, like just, So viduta. And then of course, another way to say sort of to shake off all illusion, ava means down. So avaduta, to shake down, says shake off. So an avaduta is someone who's kind of shaken off all worldly customs and acts in what appear to be very eccentric ways. So Bhisma here says that I am viduta veda moha. I've shaken off the illusion, moha, of veda, of duality. Prabhupada translates it, the misconception of duality, or of difference, literally of difference, of separation. And so there are various ways to apply this. It means that Bhisma is, in a sense, he has shaken off the illusion that he is different from other devotees, because superficially, one is a gopi, one is King Yudhisthira, there are all kinds of different souls, but we're not really separate, because we're all souls, and we're not really separate from Krishna, because Krishna is actually appearing to everyone. And so there are various ways, legitimate ways, that you can understand these words. The Bhagavatam is very rich like that. It's with a few words, it can say many things. So that's this verse. Tavimamaham ajam sharira bhajam hridi dishtitam atma kalpitana. Oh, and then I left that out. Those who have taken bodies, and Atma Kalpitanam. Prabhupada translates Kalpitanam of the speculators, this and the super soul. So the way Prabhupada translates those who speculate about the soul. So Kalpita, I'm just going to go back to the dictionary, which you all love. You all get very excited when I go to the dictionary. So Kalpita means something which is made, fabricated, artificial, or in a positive, more composed, invented, and it's assumed, supposed, inferred. So if you take it kalpa or kalpita here as inferred, you infer something, you suppose something, you assume something, in the sense of the Spanish portion would be like presumir. And so they're they're assuming things about the soul, or they're imagining things about the Supreme Soul. And so to these people who are sort of imagining, trying to understand what their own soul is or what the super soul is, Krishna is in each one of their hearts, because the reason they're trying to understand is because they are sharira bhajam. They've taken material bodies, which doesn't really help your intelligence to have a material body. So they're trying to figure things out. They're inside this material body, and yet Krishna Hriday Dishitam is in all of their hearts. So there's a lot in this verse. There's a lot of philosophy in that verse. Maybe I'll do one more, and then I'll see if there are any questions. I make a little money on the side, answering the questions. So that is the end of Bhisma's questions. Not questions, prayers. That's the end of Bhisma's prayers. And then Sutta, now Sutta returns. Sutta speaking in his own voice, not just telling us what Bhisma said, but Sutta is now speaking in his own voice. And so Sutta vacha Krishna evam bhagavati manovag dristi vritti vi atniyat manam avesha so antak shasa uparamat. Very powerful statement. So he's explaining what Bhisma did next. So Krishna evam bhagavati. So the subject of the sentence is the first word of the fourth line, so, or sa, originally saha, mean he. So he, avesha, placing atmanam, his soul, atmani, in the soul, in the super soul, I would translate. So literally placing soul in soul. But of course, here it means placing the soul in the Supreme Soul, and that Supreme Soul is Krishna, which is it's Krishna without the sandhi. Krishna evam bhagavati. So thus he, Bhisma, directly placing his soul in the Supreme Soul, Krishna, and the Supreme Soul was the Lord Krishna, Krishna evam bhagavati. Thus doing that, and he did that. He placed his soul in the Supreme Soul, in Lord Krishna. He did that manovag dristi vritti bhi, with all the functions. Vritti bhi means with the functions of mano, of his mind, vag, of his speech, dristi, and of his vision. Yes, seeing. So with the functions of mind, speech, and sight, he, Bhisma, thus placing his soul in the Supreme Soul, in Lord Krishna. So antakshasa, he breathed in. Anta, of course, from the word anta, we have English words like internal. So antakshasa, literally he breathed in, or Prabhupada says inhaling. He breathed in uparamat and became silent. So Bhisma's, and so the verb here is upa, it's the past tense uparamat from the verb uparam. So I'll just tell you what this verb means, because you'll see from the synonyms I think it'll clarify what Krishna. So that verb uparamat, which is the past tense, it means he ceased from motion. So he actually became motionless. He stopped. It means he ceased from action. He became inactive or quiet. As Prabhupada says, he stopped. Just to stop speaking, to stop doing anything, to leave off. He desisted. Everything's stopping. He just breathed in and just stopped everything. So that's what's actually going on. Uparamat. So I will stop there. I hope this is a cliffhanger for you. This will bring you back next week to find out what happens. So now I'll check to see if there are any questions here. So thank you all for leaving your messages. Hare Krishna. Okay, here's one I'll translate from the Portuguese. According to the, oh my God, just gonna go to read and then new ones come in. So anyway, definitely imperfect technology. Okay, so I've got to go back. It wasn't me. I'm innocent. Well, at least in that respect. Oh my God, Stavira Bhakti sends greetings from frozen Minnesota. So if you're not in Minnesota, just be thankful. Of course, if you are in Minnesota and you're preaching, then you should be thankful for that. So I'm trying to find that question. Okay. Shaki Jacques. Could Bhisma have chosen to be on the Kodava side specifically because he wanted to be opposite Krishna and thus experience and enjoy Krishna's anger on the battlefield? I think that's a good point. So I would say there are a lot of things going on in Bhisma's decision. It's sort of a complex thing, but wanting to fight with Krishna, as he himself expressed, that was his pleasure. And I think that's a good point. That's also part of what Bhisma is doing. Oh, greetings from Scotland. So I'm trying to find, I was just about to read that question, then suddenly it moved. So from Scotland, what do you think about near-death experiences and outer body experiences? What do I think about them? Yeah, they really seem to happen, don't they? I mean, so many people had near-death experiences and outer body, so yeah, they happen. Of course, I'm betting all my marbles on just chanting Hare Krishna. Okay, I found it now. Analu 108. So I'm translating from Portuguese. According to the teachings of Prabhupada, Varnashram does not mean qualification by birth, but by qualification. Why then was Karna discriminated against? It's an interesting point. Two things come to mind. If Varna, really talking about Varna here. Often we say Varnashram, but we're really talking about the Varnas. First of all, if you read the Mahabharata or the Bhagavatam, it's very hard. I mean, almost everybody has a caste according to their family. Almost everybody does that. And of course, Karna, who was born, people didn't know he was born from the greatest Kshatriya, the sun. So he was called Suta, which would be someone from a lower birth. And also Romaharshana, who there was a little blemish on his birth, so to speak. Yet he was given the service. But what's interesting here, so almost all the time, people did follow the Varna of their parents, almost all the time. And also, this was a type of, you could say, natural, organic, genetic engineering. Because if you have people who by qualification are, let's say, Kshatriyas, a man and a woman, and they beget a child, especially in that cultural atmosphere, it's very likely that their child will be a Kshatriya, because the parents are Kshatriyas and the child is brought up in that way from birth. And so, or a Brahmana. So once you start this, in other words, once you have people assigned to different varnas by their actual qualities, as Krishna says, guna karma, qualities and work, and if marriages are done strictly, then you tend to have a certain, I would say, genetic stability. In other words, you tend to actually get pure lines, genetic lines. But of course, sometimes it doesn't happen. And what's interesting, though, in the case of Karna, is that he was brought up, of course, by parents who were very good, loving parents, but were not Kshatriyas. Actually, his father was a chariot driver and a chariot maker. And that's what the word sutta also meant. I've explained before that if you are a chariot driver, then you know better than anyone what actually happened in the battlefield. You probably know better even than the Kshatriya who's chariot driving. You probably know better than he does. Like I've experienced that when I have assistants, people assisting me, and a lot of times they remember better than I do, like what I said or what was going on, because I'm caught up in the moment, whereas they're just kind of watching. And so the chariot drivers also recited the stories of kings and of other great personalities. But so the same word was used for both, even if they weren't always the same person. So in the case of Karna, he actually, in his youth, exhibited behavior that was not really up to the standard. When he basically lied on his college admission application because he wanted to. It's like if you're applying to get into a college and you cheat and you claim that you have degrees you don't have, or you studied things you didn't study, or stuff like that. Or my father went to this school when he really didn't. And so Karna was applying to be taught by Parashuram, and he lied. He tried to cheat, which is really bad move, because Parashuram's an avatar. So first rule, don't try to cheat an avatar. So that behavior shows that there was some flaw in Karna. In a sense, when Karna was called Sutta, which he was, a Sutta Putra, son of a Sutta, like, you son of a Putra, there was something actually accurate about it. Another thing which really struck me in the Mahabharata, the first time you actually meet Karna as an adult, or as maybe I don't know how old he is, 18 years old or whatever he is, but he's at the graduation ceremony for Dronacharya's military academy. They're having the graduation ceremony, and it's just like at colleges or high schools when there's a graduation ceremony. They put up all these seats, for the people to come, the families come, everyone's taking pictures, and there's music. And so there was like a real sort of modern graduation ceremony when Karna finished teaching the Pandavas and the Kurus. And imagine if you're a parent and your child is graduating from college, and you're very proud, mother and father are there, the whole family's there. And then right in the middle of the ceremony, someone just walks up on the stage that wasn't invited, that's not supposed to be there, and starts pushing around and starts insulting the graduates. That's very low class. That's exactly what Karna did. He crashed the graduation ceremony, penetra, they say in Brazil, and just tried to do everything in his power to humiliate Arjuna. And what's interesting here is that there's no mention anywhere in the Mahabharata that Arjuna had ever offended Karna or even knew Karna. And so that behavior also is just, it's just not up to the standard. So in Karna's behavior with Arjuna and Karna's behavior with Parashuram, he showed that he really wasn't up to the cultural standard. He wasn't there. And so in that sense, everyone misunderstood his birth, but in another sense, they actually didn't misunderstand. And then another example is you have the case of Roma Harshana, which literally means hair raising. APR, of course, because Roma means hair. Roma means hair. And Harshana means like excitement. And so like hair raising, you know, so Roma Harshana, I don't know how he got that name. But he disrespected Balaram. He was so full of his position, like I'm on the Vyasasana, even though his birth was not pure, he didn't offer respect to Balaram. Big mistake not to offer respect to Balaram. Usually people that do that don't survive the experience. So he disrespected Balaram, and then Balaram, you know, wanted to, in a very nice Brahminical way, remove him. So we just took a kusha grass and ting. So again, what's interesting, you have these cases of people who are given positions, even though their social position is not really there, and they end up misbehaving. So in a sense, what the Bhagavatam is telling us is that back in those days, because the people were extremely serious about training their children, and you had this genetic engineering going on, so that the people who weren't really there, I mean, Karna was genetically there, but not culturally. So it was a very conservative social system. But of course, that can be taken to an irrational extreme. It can be taken to the point where it starts to undermine and corrupt the society, which is, of course, what happens in Kali Yuga. It begins, of course, with Shringi, that son of a Brahmin who was foolish and cursed Parikshit Maharaj. So there you have someone who was, you know, born to an advanced Brahmin, but was corrupted by pride. So those are some of my thoughts on that. Let's see if there's anything else here. I'm looking for the question marks. Remember, oops, I just had it and then it jumped on me. No fair. Okay, Sankarshana. Question, given that Srila Vyasadeva is accepted as the undisputed authority for Vedantas, how is it that there is so much contention about the nature of the absolute truth for Vedantas when Srila Vyasadeva has left such explicitly personalist verses like these? That's an interesting question. First of all, of course, the Brahma Sutras or Vedanta Sutras themselves are sutras. And the word sutra means thread. And that's where we get our English word suture, like to stitch something. How do you say it in Portuguese? To sew. Coser.
Costurar.
Costurar. Yes, sutra, sturar. And so, so the sutras are, you know, they'll say something like, birth, etc. of this. Janma just said, birth, etc. of this from which. So if you take the statement, birth, etc. of this from which, Janma Dyasya Jataha, clearly that's an invitation to speculation. And so the sutras are just a thread. It's interesting, Krishna uses the word thread in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that I'm the source of everything, or everything is resting on me. Actually, everything is resting on me. Mayi sarvamidang protam, which literally means everything is woven on me. Todo está costurado en mí. Everything is woven on me, sutre, as on a thread, maniganaiva, like pearls on a thread. So the sutras themselves are a bit esoteric, to say the least. Although, if you look at them objectively and really study them, you can see that it's ultimately teaching Vaishnavism, as most Western scholars have seen. So, as far as the Bhagavatam, gives very sort of advanced, sophisticated theology and philosophy. And so people who want to push the impersonal idea will simply put all these texts in a hierarchy. They'll say that, well, this text is for beginners and this text is for, I mean, even Prabhupada says it. For example, Prabhupada says there are 18 Puranas, 6 for those in the mode of ignorance, 6 for those in the mode of passion, 6 for those in goodness. So even Prabhupada and other acharyas, they teach a hierarchy, a gradual hierarchy, even of Vedic scriptures. And so because there are statements in different scriptures that are not on their surface compatible, and so really it's a debate about what is the proper way to, what is the proper order to put them in. And of course, that's why Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha, which means it's sort of the foundational work on Gaudiya Vaishnava epistemology, he gives an elaborate, sophisticated argument concluding that the primary source of valid spiritual knowledge, the highest source of spiritual knowledge, is the Bhagavatam. And so because you do find this different ways of prioritizing or putting in grading different Vedic literatures, therefore Jiva Goswami, the first point he wants to make is that the most important Shastra is the Bhagavatam, and he gives many learned arguments to that effect. So it's not something that everyone just automatically accepts. Let's see. In the case of Avadutas having eccentric attitudes, we have some. As you know, ISKCON is not bereft of eccentrics. We have some. In the case of Avadutas having eccentric attitudes, how can one adapt to the external society that one is placed in at the moment? Well, Avadutas don't adapt. They're psychologically, they're not wired that way. So they're going to remain eccentric. I mean, there are Avadutas who just choose that as a lifestyle. They're not eccentric. They're choosing a certain lifestyle because that's their path. So, but we tend to use the word Avaduta in a somewhat sort of sarcastic way, like, oh, he's an Avaduta, meaning it's sort of like the ISKCON word for very eccentric. And so if you take it in that way, then some people they're very eccentric. We just have to do all we can to minimize the extent to which they embarrass us. So, Bhisma's sense of duty caused him to fight on the wrong side. Oh, Brahmatirtha. To some extent. I mean, that was definitely, and I'm just working on this right now in my depiction of the Mahabharata. I was working on that last night, and because look what Bhisma gave up. I mean, in a sense, he was tricked. I really see this Fisher King as kind of a villain in this story, or he became a villain because when Shantanu personally asked for the hand of Satyavati, which in a sense he didn't have to do because he wasn't her real father. Her real father was actually King Vasu, who by that time I think had passed on or gone in retirement. So he wasn't even a real father. It was almost like courtesy to ask his blessing. And he told Shantanu that, yes, it would be a great honor for my daughter to marry you, but her son, my grandson, has to be the king. That's all he said. I went over these things in the Mahabharata because I really read them over and over again, the Sanskrit. I really wanted to be very precise, and it's very simple. And so Shantanu said, I can't do that because at that point, Bhisma was the Yova Raja, which means the heir, what are they called? Not the heir apparent, or not the heir apparent, but the, what it means is that constitutionally, that person, heir apparent is the word. Heir presumptive is a different, heir presumptive means that someone is next in line to the throne But if suddenly some long lost relative who's closer in line shows up, then that person gets the throne. So heir presumptive means we presume that this is the next king. Whereas heir apparent means that that person legally is now next in line, and that can't be changed. And so the Sanskrit word for this, heir apparent, the Sanskrit word for this is Yovaraja. Literally like the young king, the prince. And so that was Bhisma. So Shantanu could not legally agree that his eventual son with Satyavati would be the king. He couldn't legally do that. And I'm sure he didn't want to do that because he promised his son. So he went home to Hastinapur, and he was miserable, and his son, Devavrata, who became Bhisma, found out the reason. He decided, I have to please my father. It's also interesting on a personal level, because I'm working on these things, that Bhisma had grown up without his father, because at his birth, Ganga took him back to Devaloka, to the worlds of the Devas, and that's where he was educated. He went to school there, and he came back as a sort of a young teenager. I don't know, or maybe maybe 12, 13. So he's actually young. And then 4 years later. So one thing to keep in mind is when Bhisma, I think this is important to understand Bhisma, when Bhisma is making this vow, he's a teenager. He's a teenager. So it's not necessarily like a mature decision. He's a teenager. And so when Devavrata, Bhisma, goes to get Satyavati for his father, the fisherman, if you actually read literally what the Mahabharata says, he really cheats, because he told Shantanu that I will give you my daughter if her son becomes king. So when Devavrata goes there, he's prepared just to, okay, I'll give that up. Your grandson will become king. But then once Bhisma agrees to that, he's actually said, I give up my throne in favor of your grandson. So he's already given up the throne. It's gone. Then the Fisher King start piling on new conditions, which were unstated before. Oh, by the way, that's really great that you give up the throne, but what about your son? You'll have a son, and that son may fight my grandson for the throne. So then Bhisma has to agree not to marry and have children. So basically, the Fisher King is destroying his life from the material point of view. And also another point which is not discussed, because I've really thought about this a lot, and I think what's really going on is there's a lot more going on than you read in the standard comic books or summaries, and that is this Dasha Raja, which means the Fisher King, is really insulting Bhisma, because he's saying that he first says that if you become someone's rival, then that person, literally says, will not live happily. If you become someone's rival, that person is not going to have a happy life. What he's saying to Bhisma is that even though you give your sacred word on your honor that you will respect my grandson as king, you may cheat. You may not have good character. You may go back on your word. Which is really very insulting. So all of the Fisher King's concerns and fears are based on really an insulting view of Bhisma's character. So that's what's going on. So here you have this teenager who's given up everything. And I think another thing, a factor which I believe is very important, is that Bhisma, at this point, has spent most of his life on a higher planet. So at the point in which he makes these vows, he's only been on Earth about 4 years, and he spent most of his life on higher planets. So probably he's thinking, yeah, the Earth, big deal. I can give this up. I've lived on much higher planets. I'm not going to worry about this planet. This is just Earth. So because of his age, he's still a teenager. He's not really impressed by the earth that much. Sure, I can be a yogi. I'll be a Naistika brahmachari. So, but he says all this when he's young, and as time goes on, in my view, I think he realized that it's not as simple as he might have thought. You can make decisions when you're a teenager, and as you get older, you realize, well, it's not that simple. And the fact that Bhisma developed this character, he developed this personality where for him, keeping his word was everything. Keeping his vow was everything. I think that's all he had left. That's all the honor he had left. And if you believe the Mahabharata passages which talk about Bhisma going to win the 3 Kashi princesses for Vichitravirya, when he went there, he wasn't received very respectfully. So it's not that the other Kshatriyas thought, wow, you're a great man. So really all he had left was his honor, the honor of his vow. And so he just clung to that. And there's a third condition. You're getting a long version here, but there's a third condition which logically Bhisma must have agreed to, because if he didn't agree to a third condition, the first 2 would be meaningless. And so in my view, there was a 3-part vow. The obvious third condition was that Bhisma would not take up arms, he would not fight, unless it was at the order of the Kuru king. Because the whole world already had the example of King Vasu, who is the father of Satyavati, the real father. Vasu, Uparichara Vasu, which literally means upwardly mobile Vasu, was actually born in the Kuru dynasty, not an heir to the throne, but he was born in the Kuru dynasty. And yet, by Indra's arrangement, he took over the kingdom of Chedi. So a Kuru took over Chedi. What that means is that Bhisma could have agreed to the first 2 conditions. I will not become the Kuru king, and I will not produce, or I won't have a son who will, maybe fight for the throne. Bhisma could have just gone to some other kingdom. There are lots of kingdoms around in those days. He could have easily, he's the son of a goddess. He's the son of a goddess, and he's the son of Shantanu, who in Shantanu's last life was also in Devaloka. So he's got some very powerful genes. Bhisma is very powerful. And so he could have just gone to some other kingdom, there are many of them, conquered it, become the king of that place, and then just defeated the Kurus, which he could have done. After his father was gone, he could have easily defeated the Kurus. So, in other words, this Fisher king was sort of ambitious, and even it's mentioned in the Mahabharata. It's kind of like taking out little hints and clues, and you have to put them together to see what's really going on. So it's mentioned that he was Rajartaya, that he really wanted to get this prestige, this status, to have someone in his family. He wasn't really thinking of his daughter, he was just thinking of his own status. And so, and he lived in Chedi. He'd seen in his own kingdom, he'd seen a Kuru prince come and become the king of Chedi. So he obviously knew that Bhisma, so therefore he wouldn't be safe unless Bhisma could only fight, could only take up arms under the authority, under the direct authority of a Kuru king. And so that must have been a third condition. So, so if you look at Bhisma's consciousness, like I said, sense of duty, that's all he has left. There's no other dignity in his life. He's being humiliated by his grandson, Duryodhana, insulted by his own grandson. He has no dignity left. He goes to the Swayamvara of the Kashi princesses, and people laugh at him there. All he has left in his life, the only dignity, the only honor he has left in his life, is that he keeps his vow. And so he elevates that principle above everything. And it's the same attitude, by the way, which you find in Bhisma's failure to defend Draupadi in the gambling hall. Because for Bhisma, he's developed a mentality where the letter of the law is everything. So he really gets hung up, when, well, technically, this or that. And so that's Bhisma, a great soul who ultimately surrenders to Krishna fully, who is a pure devotee of Krishna, but who is, I think, in my view, at least in his pastimes, Bhisma is a great devotee. So let's just assume he's playing this role in Krishna Leela. It's part of the drama. That his decision, this vow he took, affected him and affected his personality and his decisions for the rest of his life. So that's how I see it. Let's see. Gary Stevison. If there is time left, perhaps we could explore when Bhisma Dev surrendered to Krishna. Did he then assume his eternal relationship with him, like friendship? Well, he surrendered when he agreed, when Krishna came at him with the chariot wheel, and Bhisma just surrendered because he had promised Duryodhana many, many, many times, because Duryodhana kept nagging him about it. He many times promised Duryodhana that he would fight, he would give it everything. But when Krishna came at him, he just sort of surrendered, which means he placed Krishna Bhakti above his vow. And so I think at that point, he really got past all impediments. And then, of course, we see on the bed of arrows, so at that point, he's fully surrendered. And you see in his prayers, he's fully surrendered. I should speak in Spanish, someone said. Okay, I do speak in Spanish, actually, just not right now. So, Bhisma is, I'm translating Bhisma, oh no, it's English, is a personification of Dharma. Prabhupada, can we judge his motives? Prabhupada also says in a purport that Bhisma lost his respectability because he supported Duryodhana. So he's a personification of Dharma in certain cases. In other cases, it's more problematic. Arjuna judges his motives in the Bhagavad Gita. So it's a complex situation. How was Bhisma trained in Devaloka and came back within a reasonable time frame according to Earth time? They can adjust these things. They have the necessary technology for that. Biologically, the Pandavas are genuine inheritors of the Bharata kingdom. Biologically was not the issue. It was Dharma. By Dharma, they were the heirs. For example, Julius Caesar adopted Augustus as his son. That was common in the Roman world. If someone had a high position or was rich and didn't have an heir or didn't have a worthy heir, they would adopt someone who became legally their heir. And so that's why Augustus Caesar became the next emperor, and that was considered to be lawful and proper. So in the same way, the Pandavas are the legitimate, by Dharma, the legitimate heirs to the kingdom of Pandu. Could you elaborate on the point of how Bhisma Deva overcame the misconception of duality and seeing the same Krishna of his heart present in everyone's heart? Well, if you're fighting in a battlefield, you are not just meditating on Krishna in the heart of the people who are, firing weapons at you. So now his battle is over, his fighting is over. And so he's not seeing, our side and their side, he's just seeing Krishna. So another question from the same person in Spanish. Because that's not really related to the lecture. So Eshel Grinberg. Please, could you explain the relevance of any of the connection to higher planets that are in Krishna consciousness to us in this day and age? I don't know if we really have a connection. I mean, we know they're there, and the Devas certainly are all big fans of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. But in the process of Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada gave us, we don't really interact very much with the Devas, unless, of course, one has more faith in astrology than Krishna. But in the Krishna consciousness that Prabhupada gave us, we don't really interact with them. You have a question?
Sim. Como que a gente pode aplicar toda essa poesia que Bhisma falou nos dias atuais para a nossa realização pessoal em Krishna Consciousness?
How can we apply all these poetic thoughts of Bhisma? How can we apply it in our own daily Krishna consciousness? By understanding what it means. If you know what the poetry means, it's very powerful instruction in Krishna consciousness. And if you're a poet, you can enjoy that too. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for attending our Bhagavatam class, and I hope we'll be together next Sunday. Hare Krishna.